Good day and welcome to Good Tech, an ongoing discussion about ethics and technology. I'm Elizabeth Perry with Idka, and this is Göran Wegström, Idka's CEO and founder. Today we'll be discussing social media, and joining us to shed some light on the topic and to talk about his recent book is the one and only Mattias Beijmo, if I'm pronouncing it.
Thank you.
Mattias is a well-known lecturer, entrepreneur, and author. Social media is a broad topic and one that's been all over the news recently, as you all know, over the past several months, even, well, really a couple of years. On the show, we've talked about data breaches and the question of an individual's right to privacy. Last week, we talked about the ad-based economy. And today, we're going to go deeper into the effects, both good and bad, of mainstream social media on societies and on democracy. So Göran, before we introduce our guest again, since we're on the topic of social media, what is Idka and what makes it different from mainstream platforms out there?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, first I want to give some background to why we are doing Idka. We have a couple of existential risks today. One is obviously the environment and the pollution that we have spat out in the last decades that now risk to collapse the Earth. The other one, equally dangerous, is that humanity is at risk due to the surveillance capitalism. We talked about that a little bit about that last show that we had. This economy has exploded in the last 10 to 15 years. It was invented by Google, and on which a major part of the today's internet business is based. Recently, there has been a book called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism released. It was written by a Harvard researcher called Shoshana Zuboff. And that's a really interesting book that explains the whole mechanism of this new capitalism. And I just going to say a little bit how it's defined. And she has a very good definition of it. Surveillance capitalism is the business where free access to human experience. And human experience is what we do, how our friends are, what we like, our values, how we think, our psyche, our behavior, and so forth. And that is regarded as free raw material that is used for hidden commercial practices of extractions, predictions, and sales. In other words, manipulate and sell. It's pretty tough thing. Today, surveillance capitalism is all around the internet, but concentrated to a few very large enterprises such as Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft. These companies knows everything about us, but we know practically nothing about them. There is a huge imbalance of power here. They have deep knowledge about a large part of the world's population and have every tool to manipulate us, our behavior and our beliefs in any direction they want, and we don't notice it. This is a great threat to us as individuals, our free thinking, but even more dangerous also to the society and the democracy as a whole. We started Idka to offer something else. We have developed Idka to offer people, families, and organizations a communications, sharing, and storing platform that isn't based on the surveillance capitalist business model. We don't analyze, we don't what you say or share. There are no algorithms. People cannot buy access to you. Your interactions with others is based on the contract to talk and share between you and the other persons or groups. People on Idka are not searchable on the web. The functionality is like a combination of a newsfeed, a strong messaging platform, and the integrated cloud storage, smartly integrated. On Idka, you are not stalked. You are free to share your thoughts with people you love and care about. And it's you and your friends that decides who you communicate, discuss, and share ideas with, no one else. That's the sort of basic ideas of Idka.
All right, yeah, and just to let people know, if you, as a reminder, if you have any questions about Idka, connect with us there. That address is www.idka.com and sign up for a free account. If you'd like to join in today's discussion at any time, please feel free to call in the number on your screen. We'll be taking calls during the show. And now it's a pleasure once again and an honor to welcome today's guest, Mattias Beijmo. Mattias, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, we spoke last week, the two of us, and you told me a little bit about yourself, your journey from a rented wardrobe, closet, office in a theater company building, to your musical aspirations and accomplishments, to the sale of your first company in 1999. Is that right?
Correct.
Uh-huh. And your love affair with the digital world, and then to your books. Most recently, you wrote the book entitled They Can't Stop Us, which came out, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, October 2018?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, and so now it's being translated into how many languages?
I have no idea. I know that there's have been discussions with 52, I think, countries. Is there?
Wow.
Are there 52 countries? But I'm not sure how many. You must ask me. I have no
but
clue.
It is in English. So
I have no clue. It is translated, but it is not released in English.
Okay. So before we go on, I just want to, our Swedish, where, it is published now in Swedish at least, and where can people find that book?
Oh, I mean, in Sweden, it's everywhere. It's been out and it's flying off the shelves here in Sweden. So
awesome.
And but I think I'm a bit coy about this because I don't want to spoil. I think there's negotiations going on with my agent, and I think my agent would be very cross with me if I was talking too much about this. So I'm just saying that if there's interest in the book in other countries, I think you should contact my agent, and I'll be silent about that. And
that sounds perfectly correct. Anyway, the book again, They Can't Stop Us. Say it in Swedish.
De kan inte stoppa oss.
All right. And now, can you give us a little background? The book, what experiences, well, first of all, about yourself, and then what experiences ultimately led you to write this book?
Yes. Well, for me, as you mentioned, the love affair with internet started back in '95. I had a web agency back in '95 that, as you said, started out in a wardrobe closet for a theater company, and I sat back to back with my friend Jonas, and we had no idea how to set up the network in that closet to connect our two computers. We were that stupid, so we had these 3.5-inch discs that we passed over the shoulder to each other to exchange HTML files and JPEGs. So it started there, and we started making one website, two websites, looking the uglier and uglier, I would say. They became uglier. The more we learned, the uglier the sites became. But then, for some reason, we got those giant business deals with a huge Norwegian steel corporation. And suddenly I ended up being the CEO of a fledgling internet company then, which I was not ready for and never wanted either. But I did that for 4 years, and then I sold and left my half of that company in '99, thinking I would be a rock star, but I did not become a rock star. I don't know why, really. And then I started, then my love affair with internet continued, because then I kind of understood that the important parts of the internet was not to make those websites look good or to have the design be even more fancy. So I went into analytics on a strategical level, analyzing interaction, engagement very early on back in '99, and to provide strategic advice. And so that's what I've been doing from '99 until 2015, to come back to your question about the book, because in 2015, I volunteered working on the beaches of Lesvos in Greece, helping refugees arriving from the other side of the Mediterranean, from Turkey. And while doing so, I realized how important technology was for them, not only for their flight, to navigate their way in the night towards security, towards asylum, but also how important technology had been for their opposition against their government, and how important and instrumental both social media but other forms of interactive communications had been for their opposition and revolution. So that sparked an interest in this. And then later on, my girlfriend, a journalist called Anna Björk, pointed me in the direction of Bassel Khartabil, who is the centerpiece of the story.
So the book really it reads like a spy novel.
Yeah, it does.
Which is fantastic, because it really brings you in to the experiences that these people are having. It's got protagonists. It's about a Syrian couple, Bassel and Noura.
Bassel and
Noura. And how they use social media to mobilize the democratic movement in Syria, but also how the government used the same tools to fight back, surveil, torture, imprison the movement for democracy in Syria. But this is nonfiction. This actually happened. And what strikes me is how few of us were and are aware of the gravity of the situation in Syria, but also this brings up major worldwide conflict. And how much power should we give social media? It's so relevant. Your book is so relevant to what's happening today. Could you give us a little introduction to the main characters of who are they and what is their story?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, Bassel Khartabil was a young guy, a programmer. He learned programming early on, living in Damascus in Syria. And as you said, this is a real person. He has existed and stuff. He grows up in a very progressive environment. Syria in the early 2000s was progressing. I mean, Bashar al-Assad, who was the president then, I wouldn't call him a globalist, but more progressive than his father at least, and young. Relatively young, him too. He connected Syria very fast to the internet, and Syria also had a very young population. And Bassel Khartabil was part of that. But then when the Arab Spring came, Bassel and his friends naturally thought that, okay, now the time has come for Syria to have full democracy, free elections, and so forth. But Bashar al-Assad wanted none of that. So Bassel Khartabil had to use his skills in technology, programming and hacking, to both obfuscate, to hide himself from the regime, but also to find ways to circumvent the censorship and the closed walls to bring images from the revolution out, videos from protests and other messages that ended up on Al Jazeera or CNN, images that we've seen on these channels from Syria. He was instrumental in bringing those out. And while this is a story about uprising in Syria, it's also a story about how technology is is instrumental both in securing democracy, but also how technology is used to clamp down on democracy. Because the same tools that Basel and others in Syria used, social media, YouTube, for instance, they leave, when you use those channels, those platforms, you leave traces. And those traces can be tracked, not only to sell ads, but a government can track them and tell who's with the opposition, who's going to that protest, who is at that geographic region at a certain time interacting online. And with the right tools and the right knowledge, a state like Syria, but also like Sweden or the US can do this. And actually, Bashar al-Assad, with help both from Russians and the Iranian side, did this using Swedish technology, French and American technology. So this turns out, as you said, like a spy novel where Basel Khartabil on one hand and Bashar al-Assad on the other, like a cat and mouse game online, trying to circumvent the security forces, and al-Assad security forces in Syria doing more and more hacker work, basically, to capture and kill those in the opposition.
Now, in the context of social media, since that's kind of the focus today, you talk about YouTube, but Facebook was at the core, I mean, the center of all of this. Can you explain a little bit how Facebook was used by both sides?
Yeah. So Facebook and other YouTube, Vimeo, and Bambuser was big then. Those channels were used to get the message out, not only directly with the help of Basel Khartabil, but also with the help of hackers in the US, in Germany, and in Sweden. Hackers that set up accounts on social media and on YouTube and other channels and relayed the images out. So when Basel and his friends were censored, they could take the message out and communicate it and spread it to the world. And also naturally directly to news outlets like the BBC and so forth. So Basel had help from others on social media and off social media with their technological skill, but also their relative freedom, which you have naturally in the US compared to Syria, to spread messages. So it was really instrumental. Actually, the snowball effect and the viral effect of spreading those images from the streets of Damascus in another context is important, and images reached all the way to Hillary Clinton at that time. So it was very important, both the fact that you have that Basel in Syria had multinational contacts using social media. So that was an enabler for it, but also that his contacts in turn could enhance that message virally to many people and important people and news outlets. So that was the positive part that social media can play and played in a democracy framework. On the other hand, Facebook, for instance, is the greatest surveillance tool for a state that's ever been around. Since Facebook is a huge siphon where all our interactions and engagement, not only cute cats and cute dogs, but also our interaction and engagement with political parties, groups that kind of is a telltale of our sexual orientation. All that is connected and collected in the Facebook platform. So in order to naturally provide ads, that's a super good environment for Facebook to sell that, and that we know, and we know that has been done in various unethical ways. But as I usually say, I'm not too worried about that side, because let's go back to the democratic side again. What if a state actor can gain access to all those things, and not only a commercial entity? And Facebook is sharing data with state actors. It adheres to local law. So when the police in Sweden, Hungary, Poland asks, Facebook replies. So we must, I think democracy both in Syria, but also in Hungary and Poland, which isn't like, they don't have the best case yet, as we speak, on democracy. And also in Sweden, we can't take democracy for granted. But what we're doing now, sharing all this on Facebook, sharing our thoughts, our attitudes, our opinions, our affiliations with things, we take democracy for granted. And that is dangerous.
Okay. So my next question, which is kind of, I mean, the story, you know, every story has good against evil or conflict or whatever. Is there good against evil in this story, or is it more complicated than that?
Good question. I think it's a good question, because in the book, there's, I think, writing the book and the year that took me, more or less, good or bad cannot be applied to the technology side of things. I mean, technology is nor good nor bad, but nor is it neutral. And technology can be used in such different ways, which is true for Facebook, which is true for every technology out there, guns, for instance. Mm-hmm. It can be used for many things. So from a technology standpoint, there's no good or bad. It's very hard to say that. But naturally, when the technology comes in the hands of powerful corporations and powerful people, there's a certain level of responsibility that needs to be either regulated and or needs to be infused in some other way. And Facebook is in that realm. And looking at Facebook's track record, and also other big technology companies, their track record, they perceive themselves in the first aspect that a technology company, which, and the next sentence for them is, and technology can be neither good or bad, but not is it neutral. So it's up to the company, to the people, to Mark and to Sergey and the others. It's up to them to do things if they have the power. And in Mark's case, Facebook's case, Mark still has the power.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, yeah. I mean, one could argue that that's a pretty dangerous person to put into power, but, you know, Göran, I want to go to you because you're, you know, in this realm and having launched Idka as a potential alternative to Facebook, not necessarily a replacement for Facebook, because Facebook has this public persona, and it's a public launch pad, if you will, you know, supposedly. Idka's a safe and private alternative. Maybe you have some questions regarding social media's role in this story.
Yeah, first I just wanted to add to the Syrian case. I mean, we've seen many examples in the last few years where the use of social media, in particular Facebook, has been turned against the population. I mean, if you take Myanmar, for instance, where 1 million people has been fleeing out of the country, or how Facebook has been used in the Philippines as another example. We see the worst case maybe now in China, where they implement this social ranking system. But very much information comes from social media. So we see Syria might have been a pilot case, but now it seems to be all over the place to use these methods. Yeah, I also listened to a couple of your speeches. One thing that I think would be interesting to hear a little bit more about. You said a little bit about it before, but the information like Facebook collects and how it's used, and the malignity of all this, but also how Facebook shares information with others, like other companies or other apps. It seems to be a large risk that several of these companies also, as you said, sharing information with states from where they come. Can you just dig a little bit deeper into this, because that's something, I mean, that is pretty core to us, that we are not giving away information about anyone that are on our platform, and what kind of data is it that they are sharing. And another question, or another interesting thing, because people talk a lot about data, like your position, what you said, what you liked, and so forth. But I think it's also very interesting, maybe for people to understand that might not be the most important data. It's many words of this, but that data is turned into what many people call derived data. That means like algorithms are compiling all these actions and happenings into some sort of description, who you are, what kind of sexual orientation you have, what kind of thinking you have, what you like, what your political views are, and so forth. Not exactly what you say, but what they predict that you are based on the stuff they collect.
Yes, those are very good questions. And before I answer them, I just want to point out important fact. I mean, as I think you both said, or at least one of you, I mean, there are upsides to Facebook, and not necessarily. I'm not too familiar with your platform, but naturally, Facebook has been around a while and will be around a while, probably. And it has great advantages because it's, as everyone knows, it's a very ubiquitous. I mean, it's a very easy to use, and it's comfortable to use, and it's always there and stuff. But as you say, the knowledge about what data Facebook is collecting, and as you said, how it uses that to profile you, has been almost unknown to the general public for a very long time. And that transparency is coming out right now. And I think that's one of the most important discussions we can have currently, both not only from a technology standpoint, but also as a society as a whole. Since Facebook has become an extension of our minds, of our inner workings as a human. And therefore, Facebook is well into the boundaries of the human rights spectrum. And Facebook, I mean, has no planning or due diligence of human rights. It's not even close. So that's coming right now. But going back to your actual questions, now Facebook has thousands of data points that it collects, and it's a huge amount. And naturally, that's when you interact with something, when you like something, or you share something, you write something. It even collects when you write something, but you decide not to post it. So it collects your keystrokes even before you post it. And it collects a lot about geographic data, where you are when you log in, where you are when you use Facebook, both from an IP number perspective, but also with the geolocation aspects. But also a third, it triangulates using mobile cell towers. So the platform wants to know where you are. It's really important for it because it can say a lot to both advertisers, but it can say a lot also to Facebook about the news feed, what content to push forward. And also, as you said, Facebook connects all this into a profile of sorts, which tells you if you're Republican or if you're Democrat. It tells you, and Facebook, of course, and its partners, if you seem to be into popular culture or classical, more old school culture. It tells you a lot. It tells Facebook a lot of things that it uses to both, once again, uses both to make its own content, both ad-based and non-ad-based content, be more engaging for you. But it also helps its partners, advertisers, to promote their businesses more. And what is important here, what is important that 99.5% of the public do not know is when Facebook shares that information, that profiling of who you are in such depth and such correctness also, I might say, it shares it to a company called mail.ru, for instance. It shares it to Chinese Huawei. And it shares, and Facebook always said, oh, we don't share data. We don't share data. No, but they share the knowledge. And that's enough. Who's behind mail.ru? Who's behind Huawei? So in that respect, I'm not too worried about Huawei or mail.ru or Nike or whoever promoting their new sneakers, or that hotels.com will promote a hotel in London because Facebook has figured out that I'm going to London next week. That's okay. I'm not too worried about that. But what I'm worried about is if a state actor or a sub-state actor or another form of organization gets that information or can derive that information and use it in some way, as has been done before in the election in the US, that is scary. That is really scary. And so unnecessary from a business perspective of Facebook.
Yeah. So back to some of the things about the Syrian story. The Syrian government used a software that was implemented to be able to read all communications between a user's phone, computer, and the service they connected to. The software was delivered by a Swedish company, Idka, right?
Correct.
That seems to be a similar concept to Facebook's VPN app, Ovano, I think, right? Recently, it was revealed that Facebook paid teens to install the app to make it possible for Facebook to read everything that was communicated from the phone and how all apps were used. What do you say about that?
It's kind of common practice. You know, I've been working with an analysis and data analysis and machine learning since the concept was invented. And installing and paying people to share their data or their screen or whatnot is common practice. And that Facebook was doing that is no surprise to me or the industry as a whole. So it's no surprise. And I have to correct you a bit. That technology is nothing like the technology Idka is selling. That's totally, Idka is like selling, they're the Spotify of surveillance, digital surveillance, I would say. And this app thingy I mean, that's not really, it's been around for ages. But still, naturally, the fact that teens are installing this and Facebook's reply is, well, we inform them about this. They check the box. So they would know that it's not about that. It's not about terms and conditions. And I think Facebook knows this and actually are working on another strategic way of working with this than this. This is just fallout that comes now when it's going downhill fast. No, but Idka's technology is interesting. They use something called deep packet inspection, and in the book I try to put that in a context which brings us away from Syria straight into current day, straight into America, and straight into Europe currently, because that is the technology being used to track us every day. Deep packet inspection. And if I'm going to just map it out easily, it's on the structure level. It's on the bottom level, the foundations of the internet. Facebook is an interface. You interact with an interface. And what happens on Facebook, like that app you mentioned, can see, and Facebook can see, and they can provide that information, that knowledge to its partners. It's those people, companies who want to advertise on Facebook. But if you go further down, you get to the telecom level, when you have Verizon, or you have Telia in Sweden, or you have Deutsche Telekom in Germany. You have those companies providing internet access. And any way you whatever way you want to use the internet, your bits of data and bytes are going to flow through those channels that are owned by, for instance, Verizon. So if you can access those packets of data, if you can go deep into those packets and inspect them, you do deep packet inspection, and then you know everything. And that was something that was tested and tried out on a large scale in Syria for one of the first times, well, the first time in surveillance history. But that has grown now into the way things are done, both from a commercial perspective, in order for Telia or Verizon in the US to sell that knowledge to its partners for advertising business, but also for states to create a surveillance state online, to provide them with information about terrorism going on or other serious crimes being planned or being actually conducted online. And that's a very, and I think my book has really made an impact here in Sweden is that these companies, one of them are Cosmos, which Enea bought, knowing this also. Enea bought Cosmos knowing that it is on trial in France for assisting torture. The technology company Cosmos, which Enea bought, is on trial, is tried in France because it has, it's suspected that it has helped assisting the Syrian government to torture people. That's pretty rough for technology and a company to be in that situation. But still Enea, the Swedish Enea, went ahead and bought it. So, but my book talks more about that.
Fascinating. Göran, did you have something to say? You have a question on this, or?
No, you explained this extremely well, and I mean, it's just like a scary feeling about everything, and but I think also what I think is that it's also unbelievable that it's possible and allowed for like commercial companies to use these kind of technologies and these kind of ways to surveil people. We have come to a situation where the use of personal information or personal profiles and making business out of them is something that has to be somehow be stopped, because it's such a threat against us, and we see it now in several countries that we talked about before, how it really has a terrible impact.
Definitely. And the next, the next thing that we're going to see is that we're going to move away from Facebook. Facebook, their day has come, and they need to change both business model and maybe change, senior management. I'm not expecting, look what happened to Steve Jobs once. That's going to happen surely, but that's just part of this story, because the next part is the deep package inspection side of things, the surveillance tech that goes really deep. It doesn't matter if you use Facebook or Google, it's going very deep. And as you say, Göran, it has to stop. It has to be regulated, and it has to, and one can discuss, it's like in the Industrial Revolution, when we can build all these factories, great, and then pollution started like crazy. They took all their waste and poured it into the rivers and into the seas and into the air. And it took us decades to understand, or maybe centuries to understand from the Industrial Revolution, that there's a downside. Let's not let it take that long this time to understand that there's a huge downside to the digital revolution. It's really important that we kind of take that other aspect of it.
Yeah, now also when the speed that technology develops, for instance, AI, and how they can use that these new technologies to predict more exactly also the future, and how they can read your psyche and everything, how they can like manipulate you in ways that no one has understood before.
Yeah.
Right. So Mattias, you touched on it a little bit already, about how Facebook has to be regulated. And you suggested the other day that it has to curate and censor more content, or be clearer about where they stand politically. So can you explain how you see that playing out?
Yeah, I've been quoted a couple of times saying that I think Facebook needs to act more like a state. And I because Facebook is already a state. I consider Facebook as a state.
Right.
It has, it's a state, and it has different societies within the state, like a state has. It also has inhabitants in the state. A lot of inhabitants, even. It's a very large state. So, and states can act commercially also. Facebook is acting commercially, and best market economies work like that. It has financial interests. States also have relationships with its neighboring states, like Germany has a relationship with France, and it also has a relationship with Poland. So in that respect, Facebook naturally also needs to have relationships with other states, but it doesn't have to be a slave under the other states, which it is now, because Facebook currently are always citing local law. We adhere to local law. So both in terms of what content is allowed in the Facebook newsfeed in a country is different than in the neighboring country. For instance, in Germany, there are some specific libel laws which are not present in France. So if things are written on the German Facebook, whatever that is, then that German law is applicable. Now, I understand that Facebook needs to, like every state needs to kind of assess the situation against a governance situation in respect to neighboring countries. And Facebook's neighboring countries are all countries it operates in. But Facebook itself needs not a political standpoint, not necessarily at all, but it needs human rights as like every country that has accepted and ratified the Declaration of Human Rights, the UN Declaration. Facebook needs to take a similar declaration, or maybe that declaration, and make that like a constitution for itself. A state needs a constitution. What is Facebook's constitution? It doesn't have a constitution. No, because Mark thinks he owns a tech company. A tech company doesn't need a constitution, but Facebook has become so much more than this. So it needs a constitution, it needs values that are reflected in the constitution, and it needs to uphold these values at all costs, also at business cost. Otherwise, Facebook will not exist financially because it will deteriorate and people will demand more from Facebook, which is already happening.
Can you do that in an ad-based, would that ruin their advertisement based model?
Yeah, that's the typical follow-up question. It's a really good question. First of all, if yes, then, that's the only way they can move forward anyway. And they know this. They know that their business model is not sustainable in the long term. So they're now putting apps together. WhatsApp and Instagram and Facebook are merging, it said. So they're trying to do something. They've not ruled out the answers in Congress. It clearly didn't rule out to have a premium Facebook and a non-premium Facebook. So a freemium model is in the horizon. So they have to make changes anyway. But still, if they were 100% ad-based business, no problem. I mean, market economies exist. The US is a very market-based economy. The US sells things. It advertises things. It exports things. It imports. It has business partners. It has, I hope, trade agreements to some countries. I'm not too sure about that these days, but some are in place at least. So, and Facebook can have the exact same setup with trade agreements and with a market economy and a free market even value-based constitution. No problem at all.
Göran, what do you think? Would this work?
First of all, it would be a fundamentally different Facebook from what it is now. If you take that as an example, but not only Facebook, but also Google and others that are having the same business model. But as it is now, I guess it's very extremely controversial, because I mean, I agree that Facebook is probably more powerful than the state today, because they know so much more about people and they can influence them in a totally different way than a state can. And but if you have a state like that has deep knowledge about like 1/3 of the world's population and have all the tools to manipulate them, that's like Orwell's worst nightmare. If that would, I mean, that's the situation today, to a large extent. But I heard I saw an article I think it was this week or last week, that Facebook seems to plan to implement their own court.
Yes.
But the normal state, that separates power. So you have like elections, legislations, and judiciary that are different or separated, and that is not the case for any of these companies.
Well, Facebook has elections. I mean, Facebook has one of the best elections, because people will leave the platform.
Yeah, that's right.
That's an election.
Yeah.
So, and that happened with MySpace, and it happened with Alta Vista, and it happened with, and so forth, so on. And what Facebook is experiencing, and that's why they hired Nick Clegg, the former prime minister under David Cameron. They hired him as the spokesperson, the public policy person, the communications manager, which is for our British viewers is actually very funny that Nick Clegg is now working for Facebook.
Yeah.
Topic, sorry. But also this court, as you mentioned, this council that they set up now to settle things. And I agree. I mean, I'm not too fond of Facebook being I'm not too fond of Facebook being a state. I'm not too fond of Facebook having all this power, more power, as you say, than most countries have. But they do. It's fait accompli. We're here now. And either you regulate, which is maybe that's another route to take, or maybe a combined route to take, that you say that Facebook has become too big. You need to do something about it. But it's hard with Facebook, because with Google, it's a different thing. How are you going to cut up Facebook? How are you going to regulate Facebook? But there might be ways there. But until then, the state road seems to me more like the way to go, and I think Facebook thinks that too.
But I think that I mean, regulation in terms of splitting up like Facebook in 3 parts or whatever doesn't solve anything.
No.
I think there's definitely the core of the problem is the business model, and for any of these companies. But the problem is also that the large part of the business on the internet is based on these business models. Yeah. I mean, it's not only Facebook; it's like tons of other companies that are doing the same, but that we don't see and we don't have any relation with them.
Correct.
Right. We only have this is really ridiculous. We have so much more ground to cover. I feel like, Mattias, will you come back again and continue the conversation?
Anytime, of course. Anytime.
Because we have 1 minute, and I want to fill it in the smartest of ways. So again, get the book. It's fascinating. I've read it in English, and I can't wait to see it on the shelves so I can actually hold it in my hands. But they can't stop us. And say it again in Swedish.
De kan inte stoppa oss.
I'm not going to repeat that, but that was how you say it in Sweden. And again, if anybody has any questions for us or wants to connect, www.idka.com. And you have all the information on Mattias. And listen, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It was a wonderful conversation. Göran, thanks once again. And let's keep this conversation going. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Or good morning.